Ça fait un midin.
Noémie.
Doing a French presentation.
No English. Test, test. Ça marche?
Ça va.
خدم ça va. Hello everyone.
Non, non, 16. Non, François.
I don't even know you guys. Who are you from? Téléphone. Hello everyone, thank you for joining our sessions for the DevOps for Salesforce. And first is why DevOps for Salesforce? I come from a time where in Salesforce we only had the Salesforce, the developer console. You can put in your code, you save, and it pushes into the Salesforce. And then that was, at that time, it was quite straightforward. You don't need GitLab, you don't need to deploy, you have no problem, it's quick and easy, all the changes just get pushed straight away. And it was like dreams come true, right? But we were two people, and we would just, everybody would know what everybody else is working on. And we grew to a bigger team, and now nobody's knowing what each one of us are working on. And developer would push a bad code, and then it would block all the others from saving because they all get the same error message. And we'd have two choices. Either just sit in there and wait for him to solve the issue, or we just all get together to solve the same issue together so we can all move on with our lives. And this is where the DevOps for Salesforce is there, and the solution for this problem. And from the Salesforce side as well, they've introduced a new solution what they called the Salesforce DX, which is short for Salesforce Developer Experience. And it is an entirely new solution, because it was for the first time you would install something, because one of the earlier values of Salesforce was that it's 100% on the cloud, you don't need to install anything on your laptop. And it was for the first, the developers was like, no, I don't want to use that. Why? I want to work on the cloud. And I remember being on the pilot, one of the pilot clients on the DevOps, on the Salesforce DX, and it was a new mindset for the developers, or especially Salesforce developers, to move on to the Salesforce DX. And what we wanted to show you today is not to talk about the history of the Salesforce DX, but to show you how you can move on from the developer console to specifically the new way of doing the Salesforce DX. And we've risked it here because we wanted to do a live demo of how you want to do it. And that's why I have Mehdi with us, who are a manager of our DevOps team, and Amin, who is more between Salesforce and DevOps teams, merging the two teams or helping the two teams work together. So where do you start? The first thing you would do if you want to implement the DevOps in your Salesforce instance is to enable it. It's actually something that you cannot, it's very quick and easy, and something that you quickly forget about to do, which is enabling your organization. Once you do that, you open all the tools that Salesforce gives you, so in order to use all the tools that will give you. The first tool being the Salesforce CLI, which is gives you or installs the command the commands for Salesforce that you can use from your terminal. So you're back to the days where you actually have a black screen and you're coding behind Salesforce, which is not something that you could have. We were always called the drag and drop team, which is not the case. It's no more. We do have a terminal right now. Next thing you would do is an introduction of the Scratch org, which is more of the Salesforce way to introducing the local environment, which is something that we never had. It's like having Salesforce on your local machine. Well, it's still not on your local because you still need internet, and it's hosted on Salesforce servers. However, it's still your own copy of the projects that you're working on, and then you're not working on the same environment or a sandbox as the other developers. So we call that a Scratch org that you can manipulate using different, those are examples of commands that you could use to create a Scratch org, push your source code to the Scratch org, or just pull a version from it. Next thing you would do is actually at this time call your DevOps team to implement the best practice, and this is where it comes to align with everybody is doing with other technologies. And I'll hand it to Mehdi so he can explain, because he's better than me.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everybody. From this part, we're gonna start with the CI/CD process, a standard CI/CD process. In our case, we start with our code and pushing our code on our version control like GitLab, and after that they come Jenkins, who run all the steps automatically, starting by building the code, testing it by running unit test, package our code and deploy it to our environments. Next. To start our CI/CD pipeline, we need to create a self-signed certificate to connect our Jenkins instance with our Salesforce instance. Here we can find some comments line to create a new certificate to connect our Jenkins with Salesforce. And after that, we must create a connected app that we have on Jenkins to connect our Jenkins and our Scratch org to our Salesforce by a connected app, and we created in an app manager to connect our Scratch org with our instance locally. Next. On the first of our CI/CD pipeline, we must create a new pipeline on Jenkins. And to create it, we must configure our GitLab repository on it. And next, we need to configure some environment variables that we need to run our pipeline automatically and dynamically. After that, we can see here a Jenkins file example that we have to run some steps, starting with build, test, and deploy. Next. Here we can see here the CI/CD pipeline results that starts with pulling the code from GitLab, building the code, creating a Scratch org, and at the end deploying our code to our environments like Isoprod or production. Next. And finally, on the process, we have a step who we can monitor our activity, like number of commits of our developer team and number of deployments on each instance that we have. After that, we can pass to a demo with my colleague Amin to pass in action.
Thank you, Mehdi. Hello, everyone. So, first of all, we should have Jenkins Salesforce CLI and the SSL certificate generation tool installed on our machine. So for our example, we used OpenSSL to generate certificate. So to save time, I already created my certificate. Here we need, oops. Duplicate. Okay. So here we have, so we need just 2 files, the certificate and the server key to connect to the certificate. So now let's open our Visual Studio and create our first project. Okay, the name of the repo. Waiting.
Of course, that's the demo effect. So, yeah.
Okay.
Close it. Restart.
Okay. So standard template. Should enter the name and choose a directory where to store our project. Okay, so we'll leave it here and we'll move to our Salesforce organization to create our connected app. So, by the way, I already have my Dev Hub enabled on my organization. So we go and set up and search for Dev Hub. It's already enabled. So now we can move to the connected app. So search for App Manager. And we can create a new connected app. I already have my connected app, so I will explain the configuration. So my Jenkins connected app. So of course we should fill the required fields, the name of the connected app and the API name, the contact email, and to connect our SSL certificate, we should enable the OAuth settings and fill the callback URL. And here, by enabling digital signature, we can link our certificate to our connected app. And after that, we should give the rights to this connected app. It should have the right to manage our data in our organization and refresh the token so it can be stay connected as much as it needs. So we save it. And then we will assign this application to some profiles. For doing that, we click Manage, Edit Policies, and choose Admin Approved Users are pre-authorized. We saved. Then the profile section will appear, and we will choose the required profiles. So now let's move to Jenkins to create our pipeline and configure it. So to create a pipeline, we connect to the Jenkins and create a new item. So we give it a name and we choose pipeline. So waiting for configuration. So first thing is to link our pipeline to our GitLab by using the link. Clone link. Git. And here we should connect our user to the GitLab. So to add environment variables, we check this project is parameterized and we add some parameters. So for that, I have already my pipeline already created, so I will explain the the environment variables. So the tool belch is the path to the Salesforce CLI where it's stored. The URL to connect to the sandbox. The classes to deploy and the class to run, the test classes to be run. After that, we have this the prod URL.
So these parameters just make our Jenkins files dynamic, and it's something that we can pull and reuse in any projects that we want to use for a pipeline. For example, if you have multiple instances, having a parameterized Jenkins file will just avoid going back and just add in every time. So these parameters, you put them at each deploy, and they can default to the values that you'd like.
So let's check our credentials on this project. So we need the search of the server.key file. We start in our credentials, the connected app consumer key, and the user to connect to Salesforce. So let's now create a class and a test class and push it to our organization. So let's move class. Create class. So in the default folder, so it will be a simple class. So static. To return plus one. Save it. Let's create the test class. If test public is just change it to static void. System assert equals, so expected is true, and we'll call our class. That's it. That's it. So now we will push this code to our repository. It's already created. So terminal. Okay, init.
So now we're just committing the code into our source control, so that once you push it into a branch, it will go normally to your tech leader, who will do the code review, then merge if the changes won't impact the rest of the instance.
That's it. Here's our code. So now let's have a look at our Jenkins file before starting deployment. So I will get my Jenkins file. Copy it. Go back to my project. Create a new file and name it Jenkins file, and then put our code. So to explain the Jenkins file, first we create a scratch org to deploy our code and test it before deploy it on our organization. So we do this workaround. So the deploy command doesn't give us enough information if the deploy failed. So we do generate a test report before deploy it to the organization. So if it failed, we can read our report. So now let's run the pipeline. Deploy Jenkins demo. The classes we have just created. Run enough. Just so, and start the build. So we should wait for deploy to be
As you can see here, the Jenkins will give you the different steps that that it's doing, which it would start with getting the code from the source code, creating the Scratch org, deploying the code into the Scratch org, running all the tests, checking the code coverage so it meets the 75%. If it does, it will deploy it to the sandbox. And then if it fails, it will generate a report for the coverage for you, so you can know what are the lines that are not covered, which is something that we don't have usually with the change set. So you only get like failed coverage, and then you have to go back and check what are the lines that are not covered or what are the tests that are failed. So as you can see here on the history, you will get specific steps in red where the code is failed. So you can go back and check the reports or the error logs on those specific steps. And also you can choose to deploy into a sandbox or deploy directly into the production using the environment variables that we've already created for our Jenkins file. So most of it is, if you have a Jenkins server up and running, most of it will be mainly in your Jenkins file code, source code, on the logic of how you want to deploy. And it's something that we, if somebody is interested, we can share with you our version, how we implemented it. And we're almost there.
Since we are waiting, I just have one small question.
Of course.
Are we just deploying just the two classes that we create, or we are deploying the whole?
Yes. This is what we've, the configuration that you can do in your Jenkins file is just to specifically deploy the classes that you want to deploy and run the tests, or you can do deploy all, which will take a lot more time if you have a bigger instance. But those are the variables that we've put in the start for defining the Jenkins file.
So now let's move to our organization to check our code if it has been deployed. So let's search for nav, and they are here. Oh, the post classes.
And that marks the end of our demo. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions, anyone? That was very clear.
Sorry, I think you only deploy one sandbox.
Only one sentence. It depends on the user that you use it for Jenkins. So to log in from Jenkins to an instance, you'll need the username, and the username is linked to only one instance, as we know across Salesforce.
And I do have one question. I'm curious to know, why are we using Scratch org and not a sandbox when we are deploying?
Because it's mainly for the test coverage. So the sandbox doesn't allows you to deploy a code if it works, even if it doesn't have the 75% coverage. So what we do is that we create a Scratch org, deploy, run the coverage so we can check it's 75% before pushing it into a sandbox. Because what you would risk is getting a code, test it, and once you would want to deploy it, you'll find that the test classes are not at 75%. So that's the reason why we've included the Scratch org into the process of that.
Another question?
Thank you for this amazing presentation that will make our life more easier. And I have one question. Could we use this pipeline to deploy some custom metadata or validation rules?
Yes, if you, you can always do it through the admin setup, and you'll have to find a way to stop the admins from changing anything directly into the production. However, you can of course do it. If you can do it you can basically do anything on your Visual Studio. So if you can put it to Visual Studio and push it into your source code, you can deploy it from using a Jenkins pipeline.
You can just pull it from your samples you are working on and after that, you push the code to GitLab and the pipeline will run, and we deploy all the metadata that you.
Yeah. Thank you very much
Nice
for your time.
Thank you so much.